Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to tell you, and I say this all the time, but no matter where you guys meet, when I come, I feel like I'm home, and that's always a comforting feeling. I was talking earlier, I'm pretty sure when Jesus comes back, this is the kind of room he'll preach in, with a disco ball. And I'm being serious. I'm being serious when I say this, because I think a lot of our churches will not be his kind of place. And that's what I love about Jesus. And I love that you guys have found this spot to come and meet in. Because me being a catering director at Chick-fil-A, I have a lot of kids that I work with that honestly will never step into a church. But I got a lot of kids that I work with that would step into a place like this because they would feel comfortable here. And they would feel that this is not a judgmental place. You know, I don't think you could have had a better person to preach on a Childlike series than someone like me, because my wife often tells me that I'm very childish. And so, and she's not wrong with that. It's no fun being an adult, so you got to be a child sometime. So it was interesting when Sherry reached out and asked me if I could preach. She said, you know, preach on whatever you want. And then a couple days later, she texted me back and she said that y'all are in this Childlike series. And it was interesting because, like, the day before she texted me, something had happened in our lives that I thought, boy, this is going to be a perfect sermon at some time, and I don't know where it's going to come from. And it happens to be that this is the place. So today we're going to talk about something that may sound a little bit weird, but bear with me, we're going to get there. It's childlike knowing. Childlike knowing is what we're going to talk about today. And today I'm going to start with two very familiar stories in the Bible that we read at this time of year. With the Easter season, these are stories that you may have heard before. And I'm just going to read over them. The first one is John 20:11 through 18. It says, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They've taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they have put him.' At this she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?' Thinking he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him.' Jesus said to her, 'Mary.' She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, 'Rabboni,' which means teacher." Luke 24:13 through 19 says, "Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked among them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, 'What are you discussing together as you walk along?' They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, 'Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?' 'What things?' he asked. 'About Jesus of Nazareth,' they replied." Excuse me. Luke 24:28 through 31 is the final one. It says, "As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if they were going further. But they urged him strongly, 'Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over.' So he went to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight." Two familiar stories that we hear about people who have encounters with Jesus, but they don't recognize who he is. So some of you all have noticed my shirt. And you see, before our granddaughter, Lydia, our oldest granddaughter, who's 4.5 now, before she was born, Stephanie and I had this great idea that we were going to be called G-Mommy and G-Daddy to our grandchildren. We also understood fully that the oldest grandchild would name us whatever they wanted to name us, and that would actually be our names. So as Lydia grew a little bit older and older, we were still G-Mommy and G-Daddy until the day she called me Da. I am Lydia's Da, and there's not a better name that I could be. As we were walking on the beach right after Christmas in Fort Myers Beach, Florida, a man walked on the beach with this T-shirt on. And I told Stephanie, I've got to have that shirt. So I found it, and I have it. But the interesting thing is Stephanie's name. Da makes sense to me. So Stephanie, we were trying to figure out what Lydia was calling her. We couldn't understand the words that she was saying. But every time Stephanie would come in, she was calling her something. And one day I said, Stephanie, I really think she's calling you Hi, H-I. And Stephanie said, why would she call me Hi? Well, wouldn't you know, about 3 hours later, Lydia walked in our front door. Stephanie got down on one knee and said, hi, my baby, and gave her a big hug, and that's how she always greeted Lydia. And now, Stephanie is Hi. We are Hi and Da. As Lydia likes to say, we're Hi Da. We are one person together, and she loves to come to Hi Da's house. Lydia now has a baby sister who's 8.5 months old, whose name is Blake. We've long since given up G-Mommy and G-Daddy. We are happy to be Blake's Hi and Da also. Well, a couple weeks ago, Rachel, our daughter, and her fiance, Brittany, were heading up to northern Kentucky for a birthday party. It was going to be late in the afternoon. And they asked if we would keep both children overnight. And those of you that have grandchildren know that kind of sparks a little bit of fear into us, because I'm a 60-year-old man, and I don't sleep very well anyhow, but I like to sleep when I want to sleep. And so we said, well, of course we'll do that. Or Stephanie said, of course we'll do that. And I said, yeah, sure. And so as the night went longer, we had a good time. And, of course, Blake, at 8.5 months old, she's rambunctious. She's into everything. But you can kind of contain her. Lydia is all over the place, and she loves being at our house. So it was time to go to bed. And so Stephanie said, instead of fighting, I'm just going to put her in our bed, and she can sleep there all night. So as they got into bed, Stephanie put her, and she said Lydia talked for an hour before she went to sleep. And she finally went to sleep, and then the plan was Stephanie was going to come out, and she was going to sleep in the baby's room, and then I would sleep with Lydia. So that was fine. I got in bed. Lydia was sound asleep. She never woke up. I didn't think anything about it. Lydia, she likes to sleep sideways. She sleeps on top of you all over the place. But about 5 o'clock in the morning, pitch black in our room, I feel these little hands all over my face. And I hear this little quizzical little girl in a scared voice say, is that you, Da? Is that you, Da? And I giggled and I said, yes, honey, it's me. And she gave me the biggest hug, and she gave me the biggest kiss because she realized it was her Da. And I thought we were having this really special moment. And then she said, hey, Da, where's Hi? She was in bed when I started here. But as she rolled over, I realized that we were having a special moment. And you see, what it made me think was these two scriptures. You see, when Mary and the two on the road to Emmaus didn't recognize Jesus, they asked the question that Lydia asked me. Lydia asked me, is that you, Da? They ask, is that you, Jesus? Is that you, Jesus? You see, friends, what I want us to hear this morning is we ask that question a lot. We go through life and we ask that question, is that you, Jesus? You see, in our grief and in our despair and our depression, in our guilt, in our shame, in our darkness, in our addictions, whatever keeps us from Jesus makes us think Jesus can't be here. Did you hear it with Mary? Did you hear how she said, wherever you've taken him, I will go? What did it take for Mary to know it was Jesus? He called her name. He called her name. What did it take for the two on the road to Emmaus to know it was Jesus? When he broke the bread, the eyes were opened. You see, God showed me that, like with Lydia, with her childlike knowing, Lydia knew my face so well that she knew it was her Da. And that's what Jesus wants from us. But you may say, Rick, I don't know that anyone's ever seen Jesus. I don't know if anyone's ever felt his face to know it was him. How can we know? Well, John 10:27 gives us an answer. It says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. You see, the interesting thing with Lydia was although she knew my face very well, did you hear how she figured out it was for sure me? She heard my voice. She had heard my voice. I've had the pleasure of keeping Lydia since she was out of the hospital at 6 weeks old. I closed my dental practice, not knowing why. Well, knowing why. I hated dentistry, but I didn't know where God was going to take me or what he was leading me to do until my daughter asked me if I would take care of my granddaughter for her. And Stephanie was still working. And as I look back now, I still can't believe I did it because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what to do with a baby. I'd never been around babies other than mine, and Stephanie did all the work. But you see, Lydia had heard my voice her entire life. She knew her Da. Friends, we need to have the relationship with Jesus where we know his voice so well. You know, I told someone this one time, and I think it's true for me at least. I want to know Jesus' voice so well that when I get to heaven, I don't have to ask someone if that's him. You know what I mean? Because I've not seen him before. And I don't want to get to heaven, and I don't want to be sitting there next to my mom and saying, hey, Mom, is that him? Oh, Mom, is that him? No, I want to be able to hear, Rick, well done, and I will know that's him. That's how well we need to know him. You see, Jesus doesn't want us to know about him. Jesus wants us to know him. Because, friends, I want to tell you something. Some of the things that other people tell me about Jesus, I'm not really interested in knowing that guy. I'm really not. I'm not interested in knowing a guy that hates people for the people that he makes. I'm not interested in knowing that guy. What I am interested in is knowing him, knowing the one that made me, the one that made you, the one that loves you, the one that serves you. And what I want you to think about, those of you that are parents in here and those of you that will be parents or parent-like figures, I want you to think how much you love your children, how much you love your family. You can't love them if you don't know them. You can't love them if you're never with them. You can't know them if you don't spend time with them. And that's what Jesus calls us to do. Friends, when you call out and you ask, is that you, Jesus? Listen. He will give you that answer. My problem is, my wife tells me this, and she's not wrong. I talk so much that I don't listen. Had a very knowing, learning conversation when we very first got married. You all know that Stephanie's a school teacher, and being a young school teacher, well, being a school teacher anytime is hard, but being a young school teacher, she came home and she told one day and she started sitting down and telling me her frustrations. And I'm a fixer. So I said, okay, here's the plan. We're going to do this, this, this. She said, stop. She said it like that, and my wife does not get loud. As I sat there and I looked at her, she said, will you just listen? I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to listen. And it's interesting how many times Jesus has told me, stop. Will you just listen? I don't need you to fix it. I need you to listen. But you see, childlike, childlike knowing has another aspect. I heard this story a while back, and it's again, when I hear stories, I know sooner or later they're going to come back in sermons. And this story I'd forgotten about until I wrote this sermon. It says a group of salesmen went to a regional sales convention in Chicago. They had assured their wife that they would be home in time for Christmas. As the meeting ended, they ran through the airport to get to their airplane. It was close, a close connection. But as they were running, one of them hit a table in the airport. This was a long time ago. People used to sell fruit on tables at airports, fresh fruit. And this was one of those tables full of apples. And the apples flew everywhere. But they were in a hurry. They had to make a connection. So none of them looked back, and they kept running, except for one guy. And as they ran, he said, "You go on. I'll catch the next flight." And he went back to that table. He was glad he did, because there sat a little blind girl with tears running down her face, trying to find the apples on the floor. As you can imagine, the Christmas season at the airport, people were running everywhere. There were people everywhere, and no one was helping this little girl. So the man bent down, and he picked up as many apples as he could, and he put the apples back on the table, and he got the bruised apples and put them in a basket and pulled $40 out from his pocket and gave it to her and said, "Honey, I am so sorry, and I hope this at least makes up for a little bit of it." He said, "Are you okay?" And through her sniffles and through her tears, she nodded her head that she was okay. So as he walked away, he heard a little voice that said, "Mister?" And he turned around, and it was the little girl. She said, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, "Are you Jesus? Are you Jesus?" You see, in childlike knowing, we know Jesus. The thing that amazed me about this story is this little girl had never seen anything or anyone, but she knew the character of Jesus. And that person was the character of Jesus. You know, the amazing thing was what the writer of this story said afterwards, though. He said this. He said, "Sometimes, in order to be a Christian, we have to be another person's Christ." Now, theologically, I'll have people argue with me that there's only one Christ. If you know me very well, you know I don't argue religion. Jesus has the final say. I say what Jesus tells me to say. If you got a problem with that, go to Jesus. That's okay. But I understand the sentiment of this. We have to be another Christ. You see, children almost always want to please their parents, especially at a young age. They want their parents to be happy with them. So shouldn't we be the same? Because Jesus tells us to help others. Jesus tells us to love others. Are we willing to do that? Let me ask you a hard question. Will I ever be mistaken for Jesus by the way I act, by my words, or by my deeds? You see, this made me think of one other story that I've heard. This is a story that's not quite as fun to think about. A man was in his prayer time with Jesus, and Jesus said at 9 o'clock tonight, "I'm going to be at your door. I'm going to knock at your door, and I want you to open the door." And the man was so excited. I finally get to meet Jesus tonight. I get to see Jesus tonight. At 9 o'clock, the door knocked, and he opened, and there was this terrible, horrible figure there that terrified the man, and he slammed the door. He waited, and he said, "Jesus, I thought you were coming." At 9:05, the door knocked, and he opened the door, and there was an even worse figure there. And he was terrified, and he slammed the door. And he got down on his hands, and he said, "Jesus, I don't understand. Please come. You told me you were coming." Well, at 9:10, the knock on the door. He opened the door, and there was Jesus. He said, "Jesus, you'll never understand. You'll never believe. I opened the door to those first two people." And he said, "My child, don't you see? Those first two people were the people that Jesus see in you. You see, we're the only Jesus people are going to see. sometimes in life, we're the only Jesus that people are going to see. Only you can answer this question. Do you like the Jesus that's inside of you that people see? You know, I've coached basketball and played basketball, and now I commentate basketball. But we used to have a program at our church, and we would do devotions. And I've told you all this story before, but one of my favorite devotions to use with the kids and with myself is this. Think about if you have a cup of cereal, and let's say you put Cheerios in that cup of cereal, and you put that cereal down, and someone comes by and knocks that cereal over. Again, it's a cup of Cheerios. Are anything but Cheerios going to fall out of that cup? No, that's all there is. But you see, friends, that's how it is in our lives. When we're bumped, what comes out? When we're bumped, what comes out? And what I have to work on with me is when I'm bumped, especially in my younger years, let's just say Jesus did not come out. When I was bumped, other things came out. Anger came out. Judgment came out. Ridicule came out. You know what's changed me? A lot. Being a da has changed me. Now when I'm bumped, Lydia comes out because she's the closest thing to Jesus I see. When I'm bumped, Blake comes out. Because Blake, at 8.5 months old, all she needs is her da, her toys, her little stuffed animal oats, and maybe some formula. That's what she needs. You see, childlikeness means you learn from children like children. When Lydia gets bumped, she goes on. When I get bumped, I need to go on. But what I need to realize, though, is when I get bumped, people are watching. Jesus wants him to come out of me and not something else. You see, I love how Lydia and Blake are teaching me to be more like Jesus. Their childlike knowing is teaching me how to love and live freely like they do. Friends, I'm a worrier. My mom has taught me, and she, to her grave, hated this. If we don't have something to worry about, we worry about that, because that means something worse is going to happen. But you see, they have taught me to live freely. We have this beautiful backyard at our house. And I've told you all the story about how we found this house and how there's a creek in the backyard. And Lydia loves our backyard. Rain, snow, it doesn't matter. She wants to go and play in our backyard. She's free. She lives free, and I need to learn that from her. You see, I can remember my dad telling me if he knew how great grandkids were, he would have had them first. And he's not wrong. You see, my hope and my prayer is throughout this series that you all are in, that you'll understand that you're never too old to spend some time learning like a child, and that you're never too old to be a little bit childish. It's in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.